The rise of the Karen in recent years has been a cultural phenomenon that has brought us hilarious memes and also horrible societal moments rooted in racism, fear, and the struggle for power. Today, we will be discussing where this meme came from, what purpose it served, and how societal labels and stereotypes may both help and hurt us at the same time.
And the blue one, and the yellow one, and the red.
Hello, and welcome to the You Can Call Me Karen podcast, where we will be discussing events from around the world in an effort to highlight our similarities rather than our differences. I am Karen Horwitz and am joined by two of my dearest friends, Stephanie J. and Monica Rosa, or Steph and Manny. Today's episode is the rise of the Karen. So we will discuss the phenomenon of the Karen and other societal labels and stereotypes. But before we get into that, I would like to get us kicked off with some Who You Calling Karen stories, which are any story where you were either a victim of a Karen or you yourself were a Karen. Please do not be shy. I will kick it over. Steph, off to you.
Well, hello. My Karen story takes place on a trip with my family. We rented a car and we were in Florida. And so we were kind of had a tight schedule because we were in Florida, but we had other friends and family that we were like visiting with. And halfway through the trip, I get a phone call from the rental car company that the car that we had was recalled, or there was some aspect of the car that was recalled.
I thought you were going to say stolen.
Stolen. And then I went to jail. So there was a recall. And so the person who was speaking with me, she was very nice, but she was like, we do need you to bring the car back to the airport. We will make it as quick as possible. It'll literally just be you hand me the keys and you can take the car. And I'm here like, gosh, they're like, so when is a good time for you to do that? And I'm thinking, there isn't one.
Like when I drop off the car at the end of my rental.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself too, like we leave in 2 days, like we hardly are driving, but we are busy, and we have plans, and we're meeting people and all that kind of stuff. And to drive, even though we were only 25 minutes from the airport, that's 50 minutes of driving. Like I have to drive 25 minutes there, 25 minutes back, and I was just thinking how inconvenient this is. But I did say, we kind of have a little bit of a break today, and so maybe I can come today, but it won't be for a couple hours. Well, a couple hours passed and we got held up. Just time got away from us and it was starting to get late, and we have a little one. We wanted to get home, and I was basically just like, I can't do this. And I had agreed to originally, but I was talking with friends that were on the trip, and I was like, I just really don't want to do this. And they were like, don't. They were like, pretty why simple. Did you even agree to do that? And so, and it's funny because this person tends to speak up for themselves and tends to say no. And I tend to not say no, even though I wanted to say no from the get-go. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to put my big girl panties on. I'm going to call them back and say, hi, I'm not coming. So what are the other alternatives? Mm-hmm. And the person who told me not to go said, really, truthfully, Steph, they should be bringing you the new car. It is they are the ones who sent you out with a recalled car. That should be on them. So when I called back and said, I'm not coming, guess what? They offered to bring me a car. I didn't have to leave the condo. And so it's funny because I'm feeling kind of like a Karen because I called and said no. But truthfully, that was a service they could have just offered me from the get-go. And it's a little irritating that that wasn't even like said to me, and they were willing to like interrupt my whole day. Um, so yeah,
When
that's
you're clearly on vacation, like
on
going to
vacation.
Florida.
Like, who wants to run all over town? Go back to the airport. Like, the airport's like the worst place on earth. So yeah,
Way to leverage your inner Karen for good.
I spoke up.
That's
Manny,
amazing.
let's hear from you as well.
So for me, I am rewatching The Office with my husband Luke,
Love it.
and as I'm watching, freaking Angela is the first Karen of all time on TV. I'm watching this hoe and I'm like, you are a Karen. Like, she literally hates everything that goes on in that office, but secretly has other things happening in her life where she is doing the same thing that these people doing, you know?
Mhm.
So I was just watching like, oh my gosh, is this the evolution of Karen? And like, why is she so terrible? And also, why do I love her? So I pulled up something that I saw on the Office fandom where it talks about Karen, and I just want to put this out there as like, is this the definition? Like, are this what we're talking about here? So, in addition to heading the accounting department, Angela is also the office safety officer and former head, right? And former head of the party planning committee. She is a constant source of complaints to human resources, although she redacts those lodged against Dwight Schrute on the onset of their secret romance. Angela lives with several cats. Adores posters of infants posed as adults, is a vegetarian, and enjoys singing occasionally. When she makes a mistake, Angela's first response is usually to shift the blame to someone else along with
Mm. I don't
Mhm.
know why you emphasize the vegetarian part. I feel like, that was unnecessary, but
Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of reading and going, but
Well,
right.
I
it's
love
funny
how I was like,
actually.
ooh, a vegetarian. Like, why?
This
What
Like
does
of
that even
all
mean? What
of
does
all
it
of her
even
faults, that's the
God.
one. When you started down this path of like Angela is the original Karen, Karen is the original Karen on Will and
On The
Grace.
Office. Oh,
Yeah. It didn't occur to me.
Ooh.
She doesn't come up in my
yes.
research, which we're about to talk about. But how did I miss that?
I
Karen
Mm.
fucking
know.
Walker. She
Yes,
is
she is the
fantastic.
original Karen. I love her, and also Angela despises Will and Grace. So
Full circle. Full circle. A Karen does not love a Karen. All right. Let us transition. Yes. So, as you may have come to learn, we are going to be talking about a Karen, the rise of the Karens, in fact. So, as a Karen myself, I have been a little bit aware of this name and all of the tropes that come with it.
just slightly.
Yeah, just, I've noticed it here and there. I can recall my first encounter with the stigma of this name. I think it was in college or shortly thereafter, watching some Dane Cook stand up with some friends. And he does this bit, and I don't think I have the rights to play it, but I will absolutely link it in the notes here. He does this bit about how every friend group has one friend that they like talk shit about when they're not around. So, like, the friends will be together, this person won't be there, and they'll be like, Karen's a fucking douchebag. And then like Karen shows up and Dane Cook is like, what's up, Care? And so like they're just kind of the butt of all of the jokes, which was like the start of being called fucking Karen amongst my friends. Just so bad. But I feel like it's endearing. These are good friends. So, they love me. I think I'm not the actual Karen. Anyways, I fast forward was recently in an Uber, and I was texting you girls about this as it was happening or shortly thereafter. Um, And my Uber driver, we were in the car for just a few minutes, and he's like, is your real name Karen? And I was like, yes. And he's like, that's the name in all the memes, right? And I was like, yes. And he was like, why do they use that name? And I'm like, I don't know that. I wish
That
I
was
had
a
the
valid
wherewithal.
question.
I wish I had the wherewithal in the moment to be like, well, sir, statistically, everybody with the name Karen is a complete bitch. But I didn't. I panicked. I didn't know what to say. And then he went on to tell me what a pretty name he thought it was, because I think he realized that he sounded pretty shitty.
Well, like, what kind of question is that? Why did you use Karen as the name to pick up my Uber? Like, are you kidding?
Like, also, I invented the meme. Like, I am the unfortunate recipient of this name. It's not my
Right.
fault. I was born this way. Anyways, so what we wanted to do today is talk about what is in a label and just stereotypes more broadly. Are we able to like break free from them? Um, how can we either use these or break these down to bring us together? And so, yeah, wanted to dig into a little bit of the history here. I did do a little bit of research because I was like, why did we pick Karen? My Uber driver
Yeah.
inspired me.
It's
And
about, it's true.
I found I found a few articles. One specifically, I'll link if it's of interest to Business Insider. But it definitely they reference Karen from Mean Girls, which I will need to look and see if that Karen was first or Will and Grace. But I'm pretty sure Will and Grace, right? That was
Yeah,
like
Will and Grace came out
the
before Mean Girls,
OG.
I think. Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't think of that until now. But
Yeah.
anyways, and they
Business
also
Insider obviously didn't have a sociologist on their staff when they wrote that.
I can't believe you're just gonna like cut them down when I'm linking them in our damn notes. I'm sorry, Business Insider. Thank you for the nice article.
Yeah, but
Um,
practice responsible journalism next time. I'm just kidding.
oh my gosh, I'm sweating. They did also reference the Dane Cook clip, which I was pretty pumped about because I seriously very much identify with that clip. Um, and then I want to point to where the meme got ugly in recent years, which is, around the Black Lives Matter movement during the COVID years. We will definitely explore that in more detail in a future episode. But I do think it's important to reflect on, like, while the Karen memes can be funny and entertaining, what does this actually say about what's going on in our society at this moment in time? Um, Broadly, like, why do stereotypes exist? How do we break free from them? Can we actually break free from them? Or can they be used for progress? I think of like recent years where we have the hipster or the millennial, and there's like all these in my experience in the workplace, all these like negative connotations with those generations, but they've also brought us like very creative ways to work more efficiently and to challenge the status quo of the workplace. Like, this isn't all about just working as many hours as you possibly can. It's about working to live your life comfortably, happily. They bring us the food and beverage culture, which, by the way, I freaking love. And so, like, I just think all of these things, like, when we attach such a negative connotation to words, can really um, create some like festering in our society that is very negative. And if we take a step back and break that down, is that really, does that serve us? And how do we progress from there? So I know that was a large intro, but just want to get reactions of your thoughts on these stereotypes, and can they serve us for good, and how do we break them down?
Well, when I hear the question that resonates with me that you asked was, is it possible to shed stereotypes, or like can they go away, or can they be for greater good? And I think about, without, I think, like Karen said, we'll talk more in depth about Karen's in relation to like the Black Lives Matter and like that kind of thing. And so without digging too deep into race and gender and that kind of thing today, the stereotype that stands out to me and that I feel like I'm constantly cognizant of is like the angry Black woman. And I bring that up because the story like that comes to my mind is, as far as like a label that is placed on me, is I was at work and we were in a meeting, and there were people who we report to in the group in the room. There was a team of us who worked very closely together, and a couple of us are something I would maybe consider friends. Like we have kids the same age. We talk more personally. We don't just talk business all the time. And so we're in this meeting, and our supervisor talks about a system that we will be continuing to use in our next school year. I'm a teacher, but we aren't allowed to use it the way my team has been using it. And we are all very flexible. So we're like, sure, we don't need to use the program the way we've been using it. We're open to other ideas. But we already knew she was going to tell us this, and we were a little miffed about it because the reasoning behind not using the program was not founded in any knowledge of the program. So this woman's telling us we're not allowed to use it the way we'd been using it, but had never tried it the way we used it. And we just felt pretty unsupported because we had data to support like why we were doing it the way we were doing it, and she had no data to support where she was coming from. So we were mostly just sitting, nodding, listening, biting our tongue until she made a statement that was like, yeah, and you can't even really see this, or I don't want to like get into the details, but you can't really see the student's progress. I was like, actually, you can see the student's progress. That's exactly how we use the program. Again, I'm not arguing with you. I'm not saying that we won't, like, it's okay, we don't have to use it this way. But I was like, actually, that is not true. You can use the program that way. That's how you can view it. So that's just some context. We leave the meeting, and my coworkers and I are kind of like looking at each other, like smirking, like, oh, this lady, because she drives us crazy. She drives us crazy. She does this all the time. And we were filling someone in who wasn't there. She was only there on Zoom. The rest of us were in person. And my friend, like someone who I would consider a friend, said, yeah. And then Steph popped off and said, and when she said that, like all the blood rushed from my face because I was like, I popped off. Like, what do you mean I popped off? I was like, and the reason I panic is because of the stereotype that, a Black woman would be angry and aggressive and confrontational. And I felt like that was the furthest from my intention. And I don't remember my voice raising. I didn't snap. I raised my hand. I mean, I'm like,
you did everything you could to
I
not
did
fulfill that
everything I
stereotype.
could.
Right.
And when I was like, did I really pop off? And she could hear in my voice that worried me. And she was like, no, I shouldn't have said that. That's not what I meant. You didn't pop off. You were very respectful. But I was just like, it just caught me off guard. And I'm always kind of aware of the possibility that when I speak, there can be this underlying assumption made about me, even if I'm making every effort not to come across that way.
Yeah. I totally relate to that because I think growing up as a Black woman, we are taught certain ways to conform so that we are not perceived as a stereotype. And so what that does is it makes us act small when we are more than capable of acting like big. And so it took a lot of courage for you to even stand up in that moment and be a voice at that table and to say what you had to say in response to what was being presented to you. But then for that to be perceived from your colleague as a certain way kind of diminishes the courageous act that you just made at that table. I also think that, I'm hearing too about, I'm just thinking about like certain communities and like when you ask the question of like, will we ever rid of stereotypes or whatever? Like, I just think about, and maybe this is like more of like code switching or whatever, but I just think about like when I'm around like my Black people, or when I'm like fully immersed in Black culture, like, yes, it's on and pop, like, you know what I mean? Like, we embrace, like, almost as like, that's how we like Kiki, And so like, I think in that moment, it was like an invasion of your like communal space of like, yeah, I can use that language with you because that definition for our culture means something different than when it comes out of a white person's mouth, right? And so I think that there's just like some syntax or language here that certain communities use words to criminalize, to marginalize, to make other people feel inferior. And if you are not careful in your conversations with other people, you might be causing more harm than actually building connection in the way that you want to, right? And so, I don't know. That's what came to me with your story, and
yeah, that definitely like speaks to why I panicked for a second, because you're right. My friend who said popped off is not Black, and so she's never said popped off. We've never like talked like that to each other, and she genuinely didn't mean it that way. But when I hear that from her, it's a different vibe than when I hear
that means something.
That means something. And I think, yeah.
When you told that story as a white woman, I was like, popped off. Like, I don't think I've ever said those words, as you can tell based on the way I just said them. But like, I've never used that language. So like the way that you told the story, and then that was her response. I was like, how did we get there? Like,
well, I will say in her defense, we are teachers and we are surrounded by students.
Yes.
And so like my high schoolers, like I'm at the dance studio, and even some of these middle schoolers at the school I teach at, they say pop off. And that means like, go ahead with your bad self, like pop off.
Right. Yeah.
And so she like has heard that term, and maybe she felt comfortable saying it. But when we're talking about something serious, work related, maybe not.
Yeah.
But, well, that's what I mean about code switching. Like, I think that like perhaps she thought that she had a social contract with you that she did not quite fully understand.
Yes.
And that is that Black women have to code switch in professional settings. And so that was not an appropriate moment to be code switching. So if you are going to hang with us, sis, you have to be aware of the of the cultural rules that come when a woman of color or anybody of color enters into a workspace. These are stereotypes that we have to deal with all the time. And so please be mindful.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And so I guess like, let's talk about, is there moments where these stereotypes can serve a purpose? I think over the course of this podcast, we will be discussing different ways to use your inner Karen. And sometimes it's for good and sometimes it's not. But in your two experiences as Black women in this society, do you ever feel like the stereotypes you've experienced have worked for you? Like, have you been able to use them in any ways for good, as opposed to, what you're describing now of like code switching, and dealing with having to adapt to white culture basically at all times. And it doesn't, I'm not intentionally leading the witness. If the answer is no, I'm okay with that as well.
No, I'm just kidding.
And on to the next question.
What kind of shit question was that? No, I'm just kidding.
I think I have something to contribute to this question.
There's like been one time in history where it's been helpful. Yeah.
It's one moment in 1993 where.
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. Time out for just a second. Have you ever seen that Chris Rock stand up where he's like, he talks about the one time a white person can say the N-word? I know this is like, oh my God. If you've never seen it, I will find a link to it. You have to watch it. It's so funny. Coming from me, of course, that's terrible, but here we are. Anyways, Steph, proceed.
So this is kind of interesting. Like, I'm not really sure how I feel about it. But in addition to being a school teacher, I'm a dance teacher, and I'm the only Black teacher at the dance studio. And when the opportunity arose for someone to take over the hip hop company, I was asked to do so. What? Me, the Black teacher, gets to do the hip hop. And it's funny because
Do the hip hop.
do the hip hop. And on one hand, I like hip hop and I want it to be good and I watch it, and I don't, like, not to sound arrogant, but I don't think that there is anyone else who would do it the way I do it. So, like, I'm proud that I was given that opportunity, but then, like, and we have done really well, and it's been a great program, and it's growing and all that kind of stuff. So I guess in that case, the stereotype that the Black woman be the hip hop teacher, I guess worked out for me because I have a lot of kids, and it's been really fun to watch the program grow over the years. But I remember when I first started, I didn't want to be labeled as just the hip hop teacher because I teach so many other things, and I I love all genres of dance, and I just didn't want to be pigeonholed. But I would not be happy if I wasn't the hip hop teacher.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of, I don't know.
I have this that I can, like, very much relate to that sentiment, I guess, as, like, a woman in business. I'm a serious feminist, as you well know. And I work in I work in business, which is just male dominated, whether it's actual men or, male culture is just very predominant in my work. And I remember early on, I was a little bit aggressive in my feminism. And, like, I didn't want any favors for being a woman. Like, I wanted it to be Karen is good at this job, and therefore, she gets X, Y, and Z. And there would be comments I would hear, like, if we're staffing up a project or something, and men around me would be like, well, we need to bring in Karen, or this other woman. We need to have, quote, diversity, or, we need to have a better mix. We can't have an all male team. And I remember getting so frustrated by comments like that because it insinuates that otherwise a man would be better for the job, right? And somebody told me at one point, like, if you get an opportunity, theoretically, just because you're a woman, take it. Like,
Yeah.
don't be too proud. Take
Mhm.
it because you're good. You're good at what you do.
Yeah.
And everything, like, the firm or, whatever you're doing will be better because you're there. And then prove all of them wrong, for, like, thinking that they were getting the second best. And that was, like, a really
I
big
love that.
turning point for me of, like,
Yeah.
of not being so proud and defiant of, like, my instinct is like, no, fuck you. I don't want favors. Now I'm like, oh, if you think you're doing me a solid because I'm a lady and and we don't have a, rightful place in this space, then I'm going to show you why you're wrong. I'm going to take that. I'm going to make you look dumb in the process. Ooh,
Yeah.
sorry if you heard that. And yeah, and I feel like that was a big turning point for me, and it feels like this is kind of the conundrum you were facing, Steph, of, like, shit, don't pick the one Black woman to teach hip hop just
Mhm.
because of the color of my skin. But, like, also you did say you're very good at it and you were the right person for that job. So it's interesting how these stereotypes can, like, cause us to do these mental gymnastics.
Mhm.
When the reality is, if we pull those away and we shed those, it's like, I'm in business. I'm good at what I do. I've been quite successful. And therefore, I fit in certain spaces and I'm going to do a good job. instead of assuming, in many cases, assuming that I'm there because I'm a woman. And I put that on other people sometimes too. I mean, I'm sure there are conversations of bringing me in because I'm a woman, but I'm sure there's as many times of Karen's really good at this. Let's bring her on this one. And I
Yeah.
need to be careful about putting that on other people.
Yeah, I think that like the thing with stereotypes is like that they seemingly simplify a very complex um the complexity of humanity, right? And
Mhm.
so you know, we heard this a lot in the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot after COVID, and when you know Black voices were being centered, of that like we're not a monolith, right? And you know the same can be said about women, right? And I think that there's just so much complexity here. I can speak specifically to Steph's situation of like being a Black woman in a white space, right? And what's the difference between representation and appropriation, right? And so,
Mm.
like, I don't want you to appropriate my culture. And since I am the only person visible to represent my culture,
Mhm.
I shall be that person. But
Yes.
why am I the only person
Mhm.
Yeah.
here to represent my culture? That is the question that needs to be asked, right? And so when we're talking too about like you know the organizations and hiring women, it's like no, like and this is very popular in the news right now with like the Supreme Court cases and affirmative action of like
Mm-hmm.
like this isn't just that we're handing out IOUs, and actually white women benefit the most from affirmative action. It's
Mm-hmm.
that men were able to have all the money prior to this. Like we
Mhm.
Yeah.
have to like be truthful and real about like why these programs or these things are being asked of us based off of our like our avatars, our identity, you know.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's, I think, where we are trying to awaken as a society, right? And like,
Mhm.
and we're trying to understand those things, and those conversations are even though it might seem like, in your point, Karen, of like what happened at that table, even though it might seem very brash and how they approached you, that conversation does do something, you know,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
open up the space for other people. But I'm also thinking about, you know, there are two um, different. It's interesting. I'm writing a piece about this right now with like the two extremes of consciousness, right? And specifically, I'm talking to in the Black community where you know everyone thinks that this is a new thing with like conservatives supporting Trump and liberals supporting Democrats, right? Where this has been a part of our history since Reconstruction, right?
Mm-hmm.
W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington were on opposite sides of the spectrum about how Black people should be integrated into the society after slavery.
Mhm.
And, you know, so this is really complicated, I feel like, as for me as a Black woman in a white space where certain times I wonder if, like, should we just be creating our own space, right? Like, and
Mm.
it's same for women, right? Like, should we just have companies of women, you know, and, but then now am I like them? You know,
Mhm.
Yeah.
so I think like the question at the end of the day is that like while we position ourselves to be of authority in whatever space we are in, are we doing that to make somebody else feel inferior? And if we are, then it is not right.
Mm.
Mhm.
I love that. Yes.
Mhm.
So I don't know. That's my TED talk. Thanks for coming. See you tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, I think like, gosh, there's so much to unpack there. But I think, you know, one of the big things that strikes me in what you just said is that I have this desire, this like natural tendency to solve problems. Like if you call me as a friend and you're like, I'm going through some shit, let me tell you, my I'm not typically the call of like, just listen to me. I don't need advice. Like you probably know that you're going to hear some problem solving from me.
Feedback.
Mhm.
Yeah, like that's just how my brain works. And I've been in therapy and I know that that's what I do and whatever. I'm accepting who I am. But like as you're talking, I'm thinking about like, oh, well, here's an answer. Well, no, wait, here's an answer. And then it's like, there's no answer for this, right? Like to your point, humans are complicated. And there is a huge gray area, and there's not always right and wrong. And I think we'll talk about this in a later episode as well, of just like it's not black and white, for lack of a better term. Pun intended, I suppose. But
Mhm.
it's really, that's something that's like really hard for me to mentally
Yeah.
deal with. And I think a big theme in this podcast overall, it's like, how do we bring people together? How do we recognize that we do have differences?
Mhm.
Like this, like a colorblind concept of like the
Oh
80s,
gosh, yeah.
that's not real. Yeah, we are different, and that's not
Mhm.
bad. We just
Right.
need to like do a better job of understanding one another, understanding where other people are coming from, being more empathetic to other people's experiences, and recognizing like there will be differences, and difference is not bad. And gosh, it's like we tell our kids that, but like I have a whole new understanding of that as an adult.
Mhm.
It's just kind of, it's also frustrating to me that there's not an answer, but here we are.
Mhm. Mhm.
I can't just problem solve my way out of this one.
Yeah, I know. I think that that's why we as a society are where we are finding ourselves today, is that we've been trying to find the answer, and we've been making up the answer, and like essentially like numbing ourselves from just
Yeah.
purely existing in the in between, and allowing that to be
Yes.
okay.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great place to wrap for
yeah.
today. So the way that we want to close these out is with confessionals, which is, taking a moment to reflect on the conversation, share any thoughts you had, or maybe any moments of like aha that you had in the discussion of, what you will take away, or maybe the way that you'll rethink of anything. So any thoughts, any reactions? I don't know, Manny, anything on your mind?
Yeah, for me, I'm stuck on how we opened with the genesis of a Karen, and the mean girl Karen being I don't know if I'm like just like being like very stubborn about this, but again, going to stereotypes, that Karen was kind of ditzy
Yes.
and like absent-minded. And in certain cases, when we talk about Karen, I think in upcoming episodes, like it seems like a deliberate act of microaggression.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that that is how we are saying Karen was born. I think it was like one line of like, if you're from Africa, why are you white? Like I don't know if that's like
Mhm.
what.
That's the best.
Yeah,
Oh my
like
God, you
I was
can't just
wondering
ask
about
somebody
that
why they're
too.
white.
I was wondering about
I
that
think,
too. Like, were the like was the like that article? Like, gosh, we really are bashing this business in so many articles. But when I feel like they were just like finding characters with the name Karen, but like that's not.
but also,
So I guess we haven't really defined Karen.
How did Karen Walker not become part of that? Because she is like the essence of the most flamboyant Karen, that Karen
Mm,
could be. So shame
yeah.
on you, Business Insider.
Well, maybe that, you know what? Maybe that kind of is like what we can take away from today, is that like the the infancy, not infantry,
Infantry?
infancy, military, the infancy of an idea gets, the more you feed it, the bigger the beast becomes. And so
Mm,
the more this idea got fed, the more the stereotype got to be normalized.
extreme.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And now we all see a version. And that's kind of what stereotypes do, right? Is that it like starts off as something, and then you start to feed it with your own interpretations, and it becomes this
Hmm.
thing that everyone just concedes to, I guess. I don't.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, on that note, I think next week we will be diving in a little bit deeper on the kind of negative elements of the Karen in recent times. So get ready. And in the meantime, thank you for listening. We are
Yes.
excited to have you all here.
Yes. Welcome to the pod, Karens.
Mhm.